It's the weeknight. What are you craving? It's a nice fall evening. You're probably craving a nice, soothing chicken dish that warms the soul and the spirit. That also doesn't require a lot of time because you just got home 5 minutes ago. Well, tonight we're gonna bring back an old favorite, chicken parmigiana. Or chicken parmesan, depends if you like to throw the little twist in at the end. So if you've never made it before, or you made it your whole life, we're gonna make it here on the channel. Talk about what makes it special and help to fix the little image problem it's been getting lately. So pour yourself a nice bottle of red or a bottle of white, crank up the music, and let's get cooking. Welcome back to Cooking from Scratch. It's Melissa, and tonight we are making a dish that was actually requested by you guys. She's a wonderful person. I love her. She's one of my favorites. We are doing chicken parmesan. Yes, I'm going to be butchering the accent like crazy. My family did come over from Italy, but I grew up here in the desert, so I was never really exposed to the accent, so I never picked it up. So first off, let's talk about where does chicken parmesan come from. Given that you practically see it on every menu of every Italian restaurant, its origins aren't technically Italy. This was a dish that was actually made here in the United States by Italian immigrants. And the reason for that is actually patterned off of another favorite dish of mine, which is eggplant parmesan. But here in the United States, it was a lot easier for Italian immigrants to be able to get access to chicken. So they took the love and care that they gave to the eggplant, they gave it to chicken, and America has never been the same since. So to get us started, what you're going to need is so now we start with the star of the show, Parmesan. I am not a cheese fan. I know it's horrible. I'm Italian and I'm not a cheese fan. But for this, this stuff is the best. And a cheese definitely worthy of having its own dish. So grab yourself a good chunk of Parmesan, grab a rasp or a fine grater, and let's start grating it. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna grate ourselves a good chunk of Parmesan because we gotta talk about a little image problem that this dish has. So when you think of chicken Parmesan, I'm pretty sure you are imagining that. A slab of chicken, breaded, fried, covered in sauce, topped with ooey gooey cheese, and sitting next to a plate of unsauced spaghetti. So what's the problem? Take a look at that crust first. That crust, which you will spend so much time lovingly creating, gets soggy and ruined underneath all that sauce and all of that cheese. More so the sauce than the cheese. The second problem is, and every Italian looking at this is probably hearing it screaming in their head, that pasta has no sauce! Oh my God! People, sauce your pasta! There is nothing worse than eating dry pasta. I can't. I can't I don't know who originally thought this up, but dear God, give that pasta a sauce. So we're gonna try to address these issues in this recipe. Starting first with the crust. If you didn't see it covered in sauce, dripping in ooey gooey cheese, it'd still be chicken Parmesan, but it just wouldn't have that sentimentality or that feel. We could try making it with the crust uncovered. We could try making it with a cheese sauce that you could dip into, but that wouldn't be chicken Parmesan to a lot of us, myself included. So, how do we fix the problem then? How do we keep that lovely crust that we slaved so hard to make with our old friend cheese? Well, cheese and a little extra help. Welcome the help. Now this is a whole grain, basically made from brown bread, Italian seasoned crumbs. And the reason why we're going with this rather than your normal breadcrumbs is because this, when it crisps up, it's going to be a little tougher, it's basically going to be a little bit more resistant to getting soggy and ruined. It's going to keep a little bit of that crispness. Combined with the cheese will help to keep that crust at least a little bit crispier than if we did it through regular means. So I'm gonna mix about a half and half ratio of grated Parmesan, finely grated Parmesan, and whole grain breadcrumbs. And then give it a good mix. Every time I do this, I always manage to spill something on my board. Oh my God. Now we're gonna add some salt and pepper. This is your base. You can leave it just as it is like this, and it's still gonna be a really great crust for your chicken. Or you can add a little bit extra if you like. The one thing I would recommend is anything you add to this, it's gotta be dry. So you want to avoid doing things like adding fresh herbs to it. Dried herbs is fine. Actually, what I like to do to use up some of my rubs that I have is add in a little bit of that, because everything in here is already dried. So it's gonna add a little bit of spice, it's gonna add a little bit of herb. God, it smells so good already. Give this one last mix and then we're gonna set this aside. Now let's talk about the second problem that chicken Parmesan tends to suffer from. The chicken. What could be wrong with this, you say? We cook with chicken breast all the time. Indeed we do. But the challenge is when you're going to fry something like this, it's gotta be flat and uniform. That is the best way to get the most crust and to make sure the chicken is cooked all the way through. By leaving it as this is, we suffer from one, possibly two problems. One, only half the crust actually touches the bottom of the pan. Two, the chicken's not all the way done and we have to bake it. And the second you put anything that has a crust on it into the oven, that crust is gone. Unless you have a convection oven, it's gonna get soggy. So how do we solve for this? We're actually going to fillet the chicken. So one chicken breast is actually gonna give us 2 pieces. Now one piece is definitely gonna be slightly smaller than the other one, but at least they will be uniform and flat, which will allow us to be able to get a really good crust on them. Now, when cutting poultry, I like to use a plastic cutting board. One, it's a little bit easier to clean than a huge block of board. And two, at least I know that this has recently touched chicken, so I remember to keep this thing safe until I get it cleaned as fast as possible. Chicken is a great carrier for salmonella if it's left out or not cooked properly. So first thing you're gonna wanna do is check the back of it. Sometimes, more often than not, a chicken breast is gonna have the chicken tender attached to it as well, which is basically like the interior loin of the chicken. This one seems to have had it removed, so we're good there. Next, we want to get this as flat on the board as possible so we know whereabouts to cut. Take your sharpest knife. Starting towards the bottom, you're going to want to very carefully make small, slow incisions. What we're doing here is we're starting the cut on the bias, so that this piece down here is going to remain this tall, and this piece is going to remain, well, that tall. Keep a good even pressure on it, watch your fingers, and you're just going to slowly slide the knife through. No hacking, no cutting. We want to be very, very delicate with this because we don't want to do a lot of damage to the chicken, because that's going to result in a lot of moisture loss. Now, could you do this by pounding this extra thin? You can, but more often than not, pounding damages the flesh. I know, shocker, right? Now we have 2 nicely flat pieces for our chicken Parmesan. Now, before we get into breading these, we're gonna wanna dress them up a little bit with some salt and pepper. This is actually a great point to be able to add anything like fresh herbs or anything that you really don't want burning at the bottom of the pan, which technically is where we should be putting our cracked black pepper, because cracked black pepper burns. The crust will help to make sure that your herbs and everything stay nice and safe and it's closer to the meat. Okay, let's take you through the breading station. First on the side, we're gonna have our chicken that's already nice and salt and peppered. And then we're gonna take it into our first dry mix, which is our flour. Now you'll find people that say you gotta season your flour. You do, but only if you're not adding breading on top of that. If the flour is going to be the only breading, yes, season your flour. But if it's not, skip that step. Flour is gonna overtake any kind of seasonings that you put in there. From there, we're gonna transfer it into our egg mixture, which is just 1 egg that's been beaten. Now, if your egg is still kind of tight, holding together because it's super fresh or really, really cold, you can add just a little bit of water to thin this mix out. This is going to be the glue that's gonna hold the flour to the chicken and the flour to the bread. Which the final step, we have our bread mixture. Once we go through all of these, we're gonna sit it onto a rack while we prep everything else. So this not only gives us a place that we can park the chicken while we get everything else ready behind us, but it also gives the crust on the chicken a chance to adhere, which will help it to hold together better when we put it into the pan. So, little trick I learned from Alton Brown: one hand for dry, one hand for wet. Start off with our first piece and just dredge it into the flour. What I like to do is take it through a couple of times, pat it so I get all the flour into all of the ridges, and then, as Taylor Swift would say, shake it off. That way we don't have too much flour. Too much flour is actually gonna make things gummy, and it's gonna keep the bread from sticking. So we add this next to our egg mixture. Try to keep those hands separated if you can. It's gonna make this a lot easier. Give this a couple of flips. Make sure that egg is really gripping onto that flour and that no piece is left uncovered. Finally, we take it into the bread mixture. Once the last bit of egg gets off, so again, really tamp it down first before you switch hands. Now you can go through the process again and double coat it. I wouldn't recommend it because these are gonna cook pretty quickly. So you're gonna wanna make sure that that crust has a chance to get nice and brown and solidified, and it's not going to before the chicken becomes overcooked. Oh, that looks so pretty. Let's set it down here on our prep session, and we'll do the other one. All right, now that we have our chicken nice and prepped, it's time to go to the stove. So now we gotta get the stove ready. So for this, you're gonna want a nice big pot. This is gonna be for our pasta. You want a slightly smaller pot. That's gonna be for our sauce. And for the chicken, you wanna grab yourself a nice sturdy frying pan that hopefully doesn't stick too much. I don't recommend using non-stick. You're not gonna get the same kind of crust. I personally love these ceramic ones because you get kind of the best of both worlds. You get a little bit of stick and a little bit of non-stick, and that way you don't have to fight to get your food off the bottom and you still get a good crust. So one of the things that I think a lot of us still do is we love to fry things in extra virgin olive oil. It's not needed for a couple of reasons. One, it's a waste of really expensive oil. Extra virgin olive oil breaks down at lower temperatures than other oils. So all those beautiful fruity compounds are just gone and you have a higher chance of burning it. Two, it has a low smoke point, meaning this is going to start smoking and start becoming awful if we're frying in extra virgin olive oil. What I love to use is an oil that has a higher, what we call smoke point, or that point that an oil starts smoking, which is avocado oil. It's a little bit more expensive, but I don't fry too much, so for me, it kind of works out. You can use really any kind of oil. If you don't have avocado oil, you can fry in coconut oil if you want, although that may be a weird flavor. You can use grapeseed oil, you can use vegetable oil, anything on the higher range of the smoke points, which I'm going to list somewhere on here. Now the other benefit to filleting the chicken nice and thin is that you don't need as much oil to be able to fry. You only need to fill up the oil about halfway as tall as the chicken itself. So it cooks evenly on one side and then it's gonna cook evenly on the other side, and you don't have to keep flipping them back and forth. So while we wait for the pan to heat up to about medium high, somewhere in between medium and medium high, let's talk about the accoutrement to our chicken Parmesan, which is traditionally served next to spaghetti or on top of spaghetti. No offense, but I found it a little hard to eat chicken Parmesan after you cut off a nice piece of chicken, and now you gotta figure out how to get that into spaghetti and twirl it and not lose the chicken and not wind up with a huge mouthful. Let's just solve all that problems. So for this one, we're actually going to use a shorter egg fettuccine noodle. So these are a little bit smaller, so it's a lot easier to be able to pick some up with the chicken while you eat it. And still going to look pretty good with the dish. Now, of course, any pasta would be absolutely remiss without some kind of sauce. And for this one, I'm sorry, Grandma, we're going with canned sauce. Okay, can we get real for a second here? I would love to be able to make sauce from scratch anytime I feel like having pasta. it's a pain in the ass and requires a lot of time. Do you guys have that much time? Because I don't have that much time. So in the absence of time, sorry Grandma, we're gonna go with canned, because if I have to devote my time to one piece of the dish, I'd rather devote it to the chicken. However, we're still gonna dress this up a little bit. I like to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar, depending on if your canned sauce has or does not have sugar in it. I believe this one doesn't, so we're gonna have to add a little bit. Some fresh cracked black pepper, and a little bit of smashed fresh garlic. Plus a little secret that I like to throw in there. But I'm not gonna show you guys that one until we get to our spaghetti episode. If you'd like to get the notification for that, by the way, maybe hit that subscribe button. So for this one, you can use any kind of canned sauce. I'm actually going with an arrabbiata sauce because that is already a little bit spicier than your standard sauce, and I like a little bit of spice. So we're gonna heat up our pasta water, and we're gonna put this into a pot with all the other pieces and let this slowly heat. Keep your eye on it. Once this starts to boil, it starts to make a mess. But we're not gonna start the pasta until just about when the chicken is done, because this only takes about 3 minutes to cook. Okay, so for the chicken, we want to cook it on one side first for about 4 to 5 minutes and then flip it. You want to check the bottom. If the bottom is nice golden brown and delicious, as Alton Brown would say, then it's time to flip it. The nice thing again about this being a really thin piece of chicken is that it's gonna cook a lot faster, so by the time the crust is done, the chicken should be done. Once the chicken is done, you're going to want to take it out of the pan, and we're going to put it on our rack, but we're going to put it on the other side of the rack. Remember, keep things separated when it comes to raw chicken. There is a raw side and then there's a cooked side. And just like the light and dark side of the force, they should never meet. While that's resting over there, we're going to quickly cook the pasta and drain it. Sauce it with the sauce, and then we're going to layer our chicken on top, add it with a little bit of sauce on top, and of course, lots and lots of wonderfully gooey, stretchy mozzarella cheese. Okay, our chicken is now done. You're gonna see that it's gonna look a little bit darker than anything else that's been fried on chicken. However, remember, we are using whole wheat breadcrumbs, so it's gonna come out a little bit darker. Plus, there's also the cheese in there. This is gonna hold up much better, so that crust is not going to become as soft as a regular crust would. So we're gonna take some of our marinara, pour it on top, top it with a good amount of cheese, and then stick this under the broiler. Now keep an eye on it, because this is gonna go from melty and golden to black and burnt really, really fast. The second you get that nice cheesy melt with a little bit of brown on it, pull it out. And there you have it. Couldn't be any simpler than that. Once you get down the trick to breading the chicken, everything else is super easy. If you happen to make this, please take a picture and tag me on my social media down below. I love it when you guys make this. It makes me so happy. Tune in next week for a very special video where we do sort of a react to some of the weird things that some restaurants like to do, and how you can make a steak taste like $1 million without paying $1 million. If you'd like to get the notification, hit subscribe down below or on my picture, it's somewhere over here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!